First, a brief introduction. My name is Sipke Schoorstra. I am the creator of Elsa, and I prepared a little agenda for today's session, starting with introductions, taken care of, check. So let me briefly, for those who are unfamiliar with Elsa, explain what it is about. We'll do that first, and then I'll show two demos. And then if there's time, it will be great to have some questions and discussions. So with that, let's get into it. Well, actually, a little bit more details about myself. I'm a software engineer. I am based in the Netherlands. And as I mentioned, I created Elsa Workflows. It was 2018, I think, when I pushed the first commit. And what is Elsa? It's an open source framework for building workflow engines in .NET. So what does that mean? You can create a new ASP.NET Core project file and then turn that into a workflow engine. That's a very common use case. Or maybe you have an existing application built in .NET and you want to imbue it with workflow capabilities, and Elsa would be perfect for that. And it's a modular, extensible framework. If you're an Advent ABP user, you know all about modules and extensibility, which is great. And it comes with a reusable web-based visual designer. So with Elsa, you can define workflows from JSON, even in C#, as C# classes within your application. But it also comes with a web-based designer, which is reusable. And by that, I mean you can host it into your own application, which we'll see also in a few minutes. Some of the core features of Elsa is it allows you to execute not only short running workflows, but also implement long running business processes. And so what would be an example of a long running process? Imagine order or document approval processes where humans and systems are involved. So these workflows, they don't finish from start to end, but they have many, potentially many intermediary steps, which requires human interaction, for example. And during the lifetime of that workflow, it will persist into the database, it will be out of memory, and be resumed later on when new stimulus is received. It also supports synchronous as well as asynchronous workflows. And what that means is you can start a workflow and it will be executed within the current context of your application's execution. So for example, maybe you have an API endpoint, and instead of calling out to some C# service, you could call into the workflow engine to execute a given workflow, which will execute synchronously. So that whenever the call returns, the workflow will have executed and your application logic will resume. It also supports asynchronous workflows so that it will execute by some background worker. But it also means that within the workflow itself, you can have multiple activities that execute in parallel in the background. And then Elsa orchestrates everything neatly, which is, of course, one of the major benefits of having an orchestration engine. It supports event-driven workflows, which makes it very easy to do things like timer-based processes. So for example, you want to have a schedule using a cron expression and then have it execute some arbitrary logic that is implemented by your workflow. That's one example of an event. Another example could be an email is received or an HTTP request comes in, or maybe a message is received on a message queue and you want to respond to that. So these are a few examples of events. I mentioned it's extensible, and this is key of Elsa. You can build your own modules, build your own activities, your event triggers, everything. And that's a very powerful feature. It supports dynamic expressions, which is also important. For example, a workflow would be processing a customer order, for example. So you need to be able to interrogate that order. You want to extract some information from it. And the simplest way to do that, or the most flexible way, I should say, is to use dynamic expressions. And there's a few of them that ship with Elsa out of the box, which is JavaScript, Python, C#, Liquid, and you can bring your own. This too, like everything else, it's extensible in Elsa. Elsa is designed with activity composition in mind. So what that means is that activities can contain other activities, and an activity can schedule other activities for execution, which is a new feature of Elsa 3 as opposed to Elsa 2, where everything would just be an activity that can execute. That would basically be the atom. But with Elsa 3, an activity can schedule child activities. And what an example of that is the flowchart activity, which implements the flowchart model. We have a sequence activity, and we're planning on building a state machine activity and maybe even a BPMN activity in the future. The architecture allows for that, which is pretty neat. Finally, when using a workflow engine such as Elsa, one of the most powerful features is that it abstracts away the underlying infrastructure, allowing you as a developer and as a user to focus on business logic rather than having to be dealing with the infrastructure such as message queues, databases, blob storage. Obviously, this needs to be configured, which is not unlike Dapper, if you're familiar with that, but it's all pluggable. And so this means Elsa can run anywhere and using any infrastructure. That's Elsa in a nutshell. To get a better feel for it, I have prepared a little demo, and this is the first of 2 demos, and I will walk you through just some of the basic features to get a good feel, and then we'll look at how to integrate this with ABP. All right, so let's switch to Elsa. So what we're looking at here is the dashboard. This is called Elsa Studio. It's a Blazor application, and basically what you do is you go to the definition screen, which lists all of the of your workflows. So this studio allows you to create a new workflow. For example, let's do a hello world. And so what we see here is the designer. So this is the design surface, or also known as the canvas. And here we have the activity picker. And so this studio allows you to build logic. And logic consists of components called activities. And so let's do a simple one. Here we'll have a bright line. And then when you have an activity selected, we see
Sorry. Can you make it bigger? Can you zoom in?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Okay,
Let me
ask it. Maybe you can make it bigger in the browser Zoom. Yeah.
Yes, let me figure out. So my mouse is not responding, so I need to figure out shortcuts. Let's see.
Okay, 1 time or maybe 2 times enough.
Let's see. This.
I think
this
is
better?
okay.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. Okay, wait in the comments. Okay, you can continue.
Okay. Let me know if it needs to be bigger or smaller. Thank you. All right. So here we have an activity. This activity is it writes a string to the console, which we don't see here, but we'll switch to the backend when we try this out. But let's say we want to print this string here, and we press the play button, which will execute the workflow. And so let's see that it actually worked. So now I'm wondering if I'm looking at the right screen, but that's okay. It's this one, or maybe no, this one is not running. But let's look at it this way. So we are now looking at the workflow instance, and we see so the workflow instance is a way to look at executed processes. Oh, I see. So the text is not saved. That's the problem. I think this is okay. So I had to publish this one. This is a little bug in this version. So now we printed a little text, and the workflow instance viewer allows you to look at past executions. So it allows you to inspect the state of an activity. It has a little journal here, so you can see at which moment it started, when it completed. Obviously, this is a very simple workflow, and it allows you to inspect things like incidents in case an issue occurred, some inputs to the workflow, some outputs, and there's variables, which we don't have defined here. Just to confirm that this actually worked, as we can see here, this printed a little line. Obviously, this is a very simple example, but it shows the basic functionalities of the designer. And when building a designer or when building a workflow, usually it will consist of more than just one step. Usually it could be many, many steps. So let's look at a little more interesting example. And this time I'm going to use a new feature that we're working on. This is currently conceptual, but it's a workflow generation prompt using LLMs. So let's say we want a hello world using an HTTP endpoint. And we'll call it hello world HTTP. Because this shows you a few things. One is AI capability. We want to be leveraging AI to help the user become more productive. And it also shows how easy it is to just expose endpoints, really API endpoints, using workflows. So where normally you might implement an endpoint class or a controller, with the workflow engine, you can just implement it using a visual language, in this case, using a flowchart. So what we see here is we see the endpoint activity, which is a trigger, and an HTTP response. So this workflow will be invoked when it receives an HTTP request at this path, which I'll copy here. And then we'll write a simple response called hello world. So let's try it out in the browser. So I pasted in the copied URL, pressed enter. This is a common mistake. The triggers will become available only when published. So we need to make sure to publish the workflow. And then I refresh. And then it works. And let's go back to the instances. And we see indeed here, we see a new workflow instance, which of course we can inspect. So we can see its state. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Some information specific to the HTTP endpoint trigger, some input that it received, like headers. And yeah, so that's the workflow instance, and of course the response here. All right. So maybe one final demo for workflows is another one that leverages variables. So I mentioned expressions. So let's take a quick look at another one. For example, maybe we have a document review process. Actually, that should be the prompt. And we'll just call it document review. All right, so here we have another HTTP endpoint. And the purpose here is to show how to deal with input. So we have an HTTP endpoint that can receive some a payload, basically. And I have prepared a little Postman request. If I can find it. Okay, let me just copy this one here. I will change this to post. We'll submit some JSON content. And we'll say title document A. And it will have content. So content to review. All right, and let's make sure this is now published. And so when I trigger this or send this request, oh, okay, so we have a little error. Let's see. Okay, so we have the HTTP endpoint which executed. It wanted to send an email, but it has an error. And so let's see what the error is. It says cannot read property 0 of null. okay, so I made a mistake in this workflow, or the AI made a mistake. And so we can see the mistake here and then try to figure it out. In the interest of time, I will not dig into figuring out this error, but the main point is using a workflow engine, it also gives you a lot of observability, and which makes it easier to troubleshoot issues. And obviously, I didn't get to the final point here. So yeah, so this is Elsa in a nutshell. The second part of this demo is about AI. So I already showed the ability to generate workflows, which is a huge productivity boost, especially if you're new to Elsa and you still need to figure out how things work. This could be a great starting point. But this is not the only use of AI within a workflow engine. So this is just one angle, so to speak. What about leveraging AI from within your workflow? And maybe even more important question is, do we even still need workflow engines and process designers with the current pace of AI, where it could potentially generate these processes for you? So how does that fit together? And so what I want to show you is a hybrid model where we leverage AI in this example to generate a process, but this process is now, it's a deterministic process, which is what you want for many, many business processes. For most of them, it doesn't really make sense to generate them repeatedly, not only because of costs, but also because those processes may be very non-deterministic. That is not what you want. What you want instead is you want the ability to execute cognitive services as part of your process. So let's take a quick look. Yeah, so let me show you in the form of a new workflow, and we'll call it content publishing pipeline. So let's imagine we have an article and we want some AI processes to proofread the article or the content for errors. Maybe we'll want to generate some tags for social media sharing, that kind of thing. So here we'll say a process that.
Sorry for the interruption. I have a small question. Which AI model are you using on the back for this text box, for this AI workflow generation prompt?
Which model, is that the question? Which LLM model?
Yeah, this.
So this is, yeah. So this specifically is not actually at this moment invoking a model, but once it's fully implemented, so this is a proof of concept, it will have a modular, configurable set of models. What I'm about to show you, that is actually invoking AIs or chat LLMs, and that is using currently the OpenAI API through semantic kernel. And semantic kernel, as you might know, is supports many models, and that aspect is configurable. So we can use any model. In this demo, I will be using GPT-4o.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a content publishing pipeline that reviews content for errors and generates translations. That could be a nice use case. So obviously, it might be a little bit expensive to use an LLM for doing the translations, but all the same, it's quite convenient to be able to do so. And let's say, and generate some tags. All right, so let's see. No, that's not the correct one. So let me try something else. Oh, what's this? Document review. Okay. Okay, so this trick worked a little bit better. And just to repeat, this was conceptual. So this generation doesn't actually use a model yet. That this is a work in progress, but it's as I mentioned, a proof of concept. So let's see it. Let's take a look at this workflow. So again, we use an HTTP endpoint, which I use a lot of the time because it's convenient for demo purposes. Obviously, we have many more activities and triggers, and also you can invoke workflows programmatically from your own application. So here we have the article endpoint, which expects a JSON body. We're going to write a little response that says, hey, we're working on your content, check back later. And then comes the interesting stuff, which are, let me zoom in a little bit. So here we have an activity that's actually an agent activity, and it has a persona of proofreader. And I shouldn't really say agent. These are more like pre-configured GPTs, prompts, if you will. I will take a look at them in a second. But the role of this one is to check the inbound content for mistakes. And so it receives as its input a variable called article, which is defined here. And this is a JSON object that we'll post to this workflow in a second. And then it's going to, once it provided the response for that through its output, which again, it's going to just update the article variable with a corrected version of the article. It's going to do a few things in parallel. So it's going to translate it into the Turkish language, Chinese, and Dutch. And it's going to also generate some tags from the article, which could be useful for social media promotion, for example. So let's publish this one. So it's back here. And then we'll submit this request here. And notice that I'm sending a JSON payload with a body and a title. And the models are configured, as we'll see in a second, to support any field. So it's just going to take a look at every field, and it will just work with that. Here, notice there's a small typo. If you can see it, it says short.
Sorry to interrupt, but by any chance, can you zoom it, the Postman, or is it allowing you to zoom it?
Yeah, I'm afraid. Let's see. Let's take a look at the view. Oh, yeah, it has zoom. Okay, so it's like the web browser.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So as you can see here, there's a little typo, another typo here, another one here. But yeah, let's just submit this. Okay, so it's taking a long time, and that's because of a recent update where we allow agents to execute synchronously instead of asynchronously. So we're going to make a quick change to show how that works. But now, effectively, we received the response, which should also mean that if we go to the instances view and we go to document review, not this one. Let me refresh. Let me clean this up. So let me make sure that I got this right. So we have this. We have another one here. Oh, okay. So let me just clean things up. I think I made a small mistake somewhere. So article, and here I'm posting to article. Oh, okay. I see I'm posting to the wrong environment. That doesn't help. So let me switch to local, try this again. Okay, and in this case, we received the response immediately. So this version actually uses asynchronous agents. So here we see the status of the workflow instance is suspended. And of course, it's progressing in the background. So at this moment, everything has completed. And that also means the status is now finished. So let's see what it did. So first of all, we received our payload containing the body with the mistake here and everything else. And then we went to the proofreader here, which received that content. And then here it provided the output. So it provided the corrected version, the title, and that's great. And then it went into these 4 activities. So let me zoom in a little bit here. So I translated the content into Turkish. I will not attempt to pronounce this, but you can read this. We have the Chinese version, of course, and the Dutch version, which I will spare you from me pronouncing this one. And finally, the tagger, which extracted or generated some tags relevant to the content. Now, this, of course, most of you will be very familiar when you're using ChatGPT, all of the capabilities. But what's nice is that with a workflow engine such as Elsa, we can orchestrate these LLMs in a very predictable, deterministic manner. So we get the best of both worlds, a deterministic process, but also with cognitive services that allow for actions that normally a person would do, but now we can delegate that to an agent. So let me show you briefly how these activities came about. So I did not create each activity individually using C#. Instead, there's a module in Elsa called Agents, and it's more or less an agent studio. It's very primitive at the moment. It's an early version, but it's going to receive a lot of very, very nice features. Here we're looking at a list of those agents, which probably will be renamed to GPTs or assistants, because we are also going to work on actual agent support so that you can actually invoke an autonomous agent. But that aside, let's take a look at the proofreader. So as we can see, it has a name proofreader and a description. And it has a prompt template. And this is key to basically giving your GPT a persona. And in this case, you're a proofreader and some instructions here. And what is very important when defining these agents is to provide, be very specific about what you want in terms of the output. So here I'm specifying the expected input and the expected output, which is key. Obviously, if this is non-deterministic, it will be very hard to parse from the workflow. So this is important to get very deterministic. And I think OpenAI has made a lot of advancements in making sure that the JSON output is close to 100% sure to receive. What's nice about this here is that we get to use placeholders. So here I'm saying, here's the JSON containing the fields proofread and correct, and that's placeholder. So this is a variable. And these variables you get to define here as input. So here I created an input called content with a description. And this information is then used by the activity on the workflow. So just to bring home that point, the activities we saw on the workflows are not hard-coded in C# or anything. They're dynamically derived from these agent definitions. And so here we get to provide the output, some services. At this moment, I only have chat completion installed, some plugins, which is another super powerful feature of LLM, to be able to invoke tools and creating those tools using semantic kernel, which is the underlying library being used by this module, allows you to basically turn any C# or .NET function into a tool, including database access or invoking your own APIs, so that now the LLM can decide when to use any of the tools that was assigned to that agent. And here I just have image generator, but obviously this is extensible. And finally, we have execution settings which control how creative is the LLM. Should it be very strict, or should it be very liberal or very creative? And so these are all settings that ultimately are exposed by semantic kernel or feed back into the semantic kernel. So that concludes the first demo. Let me know if there's any questions before we continue.
I have one question about this agent feature of the Elsa. Can we use this agent feature now, or will it come with the feature version of the Elsa?
So this is available as of Elsa 3.3, which has been released for a while now. So yes, it is already possible to use it today.
Okay,
By the way, people asking it, is it production ready? So this is a question from YouTube.
Yeah, so it depends on what you need in production. Currently, it's hard-coded to be using OpenAI's GPT. So if you want to use a different model like Llama, that's currently not possible. So if you're okay with that limitation, then yes, it's production ready. It works very well. But it has functional limitations at the moment. And but we have a big roadmap to be continuing this. But yeah, it should be useful already today. All right, thank you for that question. Let me switch back here. All right, so we've gotten a glimpse of Elsa, what you can do with it, how it works. But as mentioned, we can not only create standalone workflow engines, but we can also integrate it directly into other projects. And that's actually where it really shines. If you embed a workflow engine in an application that has a rich domain. So ABP has as an ABP developer, and you develop your modules, you create your own domain models, and they may have events, they have entities, and most likely you will want to implement some business logic. So you could be handling events produced by certain services. But what's really powerful is if you are now able to capture those events using workflows, because what a workflow allows you to do is implement logic visually or even programmatically, but it's very easy to just change the implementation of the logic and try things out and have a very short development cycle, if you will. So for this demo, I prepared a little proof of concept. It has issues, but it shows that it's very easy to use. And yeah, let me just get into it. And I want to start with showing you the solution structure first. So here I have an ABP solution 1. This was, by the way, created with the ABP Studio, which was really nice to use. I don't have a lot of experience with ABP. I've played around with it in the past, but this got me really started really quickly. So what I have is a bunch of modules. Oh, sorry, these are application projects. So we have the web, we have some HTTP API. This is all boilerplate, if you will. And then we have a module, and this is what I created also using the studio. And this is what brings in Elsa. So let me just run the application. So
sorry, by the way, people are asking about can you make it bigger in the code editor?
Of course, yes.
No.
So the code editor, that should be easy. So yeah, so and we'll go through this in a few minutes, just to get a feel for what it takes to integrate Elsa as a module into ABP. And so it's freezing a little bit for me after the zoom in. So let's wait. Well, let's not wait for writer. Let me switch to the browser now. Yeah, so here we have also using the studio, I generated an application using the Lab10x theme, which looks very slick, I must say. And we have the built-in administration module. We have Elsa, which we'll dig into, and a bookstore module, which also comes from some, was generated by Studio. I wanted to start with the bookstore first and showcase Elsa together with a sample domain like having a bookstore. So here we have an empty list of books. Obviously, we can create a new book. And what I want to show is the following scenario. Let's say we create a new book, but we want to then kick off a workflow that performs some processing of that book. To that end, I have, let me refresh. We have Elsa Studio connected to the ABP application. So to be clear, this application here is hosting a workflow engine, the Elsa workflow engine. So this studio here is connected to that. So think of this as a spa. We have a bunch of workflows, and here we have a workflow called book created. And so this is a custom activity that is a trigger, and it listens for the book created events. So we'll take a look at how to publish that event in a minute. But what I want to show here is that we can now use a workflow to handle that event. We can filter it by book type. So maybe we're only interested in a specific book type. We could also leave it empty if we want to capture any and all events for any type of book. We could even change this into having a list of book types that we're interested in, but for POC, this is sufficient. So as the output, we receive the created book, which is of type book DTO. So here we have a variable called created book of type book DTO. So to be clear, this is a C# class that comes from the books module. Now here we have another GPT called marketeer. And so the marketeer is defined as follows. So here we have marketeer. And we are saying to this GPT, you are a marketer specializing in writing marketing blurbs for promoting books on social media and generating tags to go with that. So here we provide an input of called book title, a genre, and a published date. And that's of course defined here. So we specify the types and the description. And this is metadata used by the workflow designer to generate this input here. So if I make this bigger, we see book title, genre, published date. And so what we put in to this GPT is, of course, the book title from the created book variable that was received by this event, the genre, published date, etc. As its output, it will produce a JSON object or a dynamic object called, the variable to capture this is called marketing blurb. So we capture that in this variable here, which we can then use to do whatever else we want, maybe share it on X or on Facebook, or send an email to the marketing department, which is the example used here. So let's see if this works. First, let's make sure this is published. No, so let me publish this. We will see an error now. And this is one of the issues that I mentioned earlier, where when hosting Elsa's REST API from ABP, the HTTP response is 204, which means no content instead of 200. Okay, I need to figure this out separately, but it's a known issue for now. I will just refresh because it will have published it. It's just the response is incorrect. So maybe some middleware is somewhere playing tricks on me, but that's okay. This is published. Let's go ahead and actually create a book. So we go back to our ABP application here. We'll create a new book. And we'll call it Mastering ABP Framework, which I've been told is a very nice book. So we'll use the science topic or genre, published date, I think somewhere in 2021. Let's see. Books. So here we have this. February 28th. All right, and the price will give you a big discount, 20 euros. So we press save. The book has been created. So if everything worked out, we should be able to see the workflow instance here. So indeed, we see a new instance called book created. So yes, we received this one. Let's take a look at the output. So yes, we see a name, the type, which is the genre, the published date, etc. All right, so then here we see the AI called marketeer. It indeed generated a blurb. So this is for marketing purposes. Unleash the power of cutting edge technology with mastering blah, blah. Dive deep. Well, an entire blurb, and then some tags that we can use. Science reads, application development, etc. Yeah, and then we want to send an email. And so we just attach the entire blurb as is in the body. Obviously, this could be a very nice email template. Yeah. So how does this work? So let's switch to the solution here. Yeah, so we have the Elsa Workflows module where we have an actual class called Elsa Workflows module. Oh, okay, so my writer actually did hang after increasing the font size. So I will have to force quit. Are we still good on time?
Yeah, no problem for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me force quit writer and restart.
By the way, this demo, is it open source? Can I access on GitHub or other?
Yes, absolutely. Everything that I'm showing is open source and already available on GitHub, and I will be sure to share the links.
Okay, thanks.
So this one. So let me start actually with the domain, the books domain. So here we have.
Before we go, I think we need to zoom in again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay. You're right. Is this okay?
Okay, it seems okay right now. If someone tells they cannot read, I tell you. Okay.
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. All right. So, all right. So here we have the book model, and let me see where the service is. So we have shared, of course, book type. So I'm looking for the book app service, which is here. So here, okay, this is in the application. So this service has a method to create a book, and this is called from the UI whenever I create a new book. But I updated it a little bit to by injecting the repository myself instead of using the some other service. And the reason for that is I was getting an authentication issue when I think there's some stuff that's being patched onto it when executing in HTTP context. I'm not entirely sure, but I worked around it for now. Basically, I'm going to map the create update book DTO to an actual book, insert it into the repository, and then use the local event bus to publish a notification or an event, which is happening here. And then I just return the book. But this is key right here, that the publication of this event, because what this allows me to do is have an event handler, which happened to be in the same module here, but this could come from any other module. So for example, you could create a separate module called something like books.activities, for example, because what this allows us to do is to say, to trigger workflows basically, and that's exactly what's happening here. So here I'm using a Elsa service called iStimulus Dispatcher, and its responsibility is to dispatch stimulus, and stimulus is another word for external input, so to speak. So here we receive the book created event, and then I'm going to invoke send async on the stimulus dispatcher. And as input, I provide some book created stimulus, which includes the type of the book. And if you'll recall, the type is the genre, and the activity, the book created trigger, uses that as a filter. So I'm including it here so that the correct workflows are triggered. And I'm including some metadata, which carries some input, which is the book itself. So with all this in place, we can now go to the activities. So here we have a bunch of Elsa activities, and the one we're interested in is the book created trigger. So this is an Elsa activity inheriting from trigger, which ultimately inherits or implements iActivity. So this is an actual activity that you can create in code. Here is the book type exposed as a public property, and the Elsa Studio UI will then use this information, including this metadata, to generate the UI. So custom activity creation is super easy with Elsa. You don't have to be concerned with the UI because all of that is driven by metadata. And even that aspect is extensible. So you are also able to create custom UI and bind it to a UI hints, basically. Anyway, so here we have the execute method, and it's going to, well, check if it's used as a trigger. Did a trigger start the workflow, or is this workflow being resumed? And so this goes into the difference between activity triggers and blocking activities, which we haven't discussed, but we can delve into that a little bit deeper. Suffice it to say, we are going to into this method here that is going to here, which is going to receive the book that we send as an input. So here we receive the actual book that was created, and we're setting it as the output for this activity. So the implementation is straightforward. There's no actual logic here other than just checking to see if it's a trigger or not, and then producing the received book as the output of this activity. Oh, I will have to start the studio as well. That's this one. So while that loads, let me show you something else. Well, actually, yeah, let me show you this one as well. So we actually started with the most complicated activity, which is triggers. It's more complicated than action-like activities like creating a book, because that's another thing you can do. Instead of, or in addition to using the UI, we could also have a workflow that creates the book from the workflow. So here we have the create book activity, and this implementation is a little bit more interesting because it uses ABP services like the repository of books, creating a new book using the input from the activity defined here. So again, here we have public properties. They're being used here to construct a book. We are going to then insert a book into the repository and publish an event called book created event. And so what you can expect to see here, when a workflow with this activity were to execute, and if you then would also have a workflow that listens for book created events, that would then execute as well. So yeah, so you can do a lot of interesting stuff with workflows in this manner. And of course, the nice thing is that having the ability to create domain-specific activities to make it very easy for workflow developers to create business logic with a higher level activity, so to speak. And I don't have a demo of this activity, but just as to complete the example, you can then also, there might be workflows where you want to be able to load in a book into the workflow context using a book ID, for example. And this is an example of a activity that can do exactly that. Again, it produces an output of type book DTO. Internally, it uses the repository and just yeah, and it just provides it here as the output. Another interesting aspect is the ability to provide different outcomes of an activity. So there's a difference between output and outcome. An outcome is like an if-else, but provided by the activity, so that you don't have to actually explicitly use a decision activity in the workflow. So imagine you just get the book, but maybe you provided a ID that doesn't exist. Then you would have to normally produce, well, you would produce a null value as the result, but then you would have to do a flow decision that checks to see if the variable is null or not. But in this case, you don't have to. The activity provides either a found or a not found outcome. So let's see if we can start this. Actually, I don't think this is the correct solution. Let me open the correct one. Okay, so while this loads, let me go back to this part here. So we've looked at Elsa Studio as a separate application. At the beginning, I also mentioned that the web-based designer is reusable, so it's rehostable into your own application. And as a proof of concept, I've added a menu here, and then we can go to, let's start with workflow definitions. After I start the application, like this. So let's wait for ABP to start. So here it's initializing the Elsa module, and it starts. All right, so if we refresh, all right, so we're back. Yeah, so let's go to this page here. It's loading the page first time. All right, so what we see here is a Blazor component embedded in this this theme, this Lepton-X theme, and you may have noticed briefly some change in styling. It was losing the style in the menu, and then it reappeared. And this is a potential disadvantage of using other components using different style sheets without using a shadow DOM, but that's a separate topic. The key thing that I wanted to show here is to have the ability to rehost Blazor components, such as Elsa Studio, into your own application. So before Elsa 3, we were using Stencil.js, which is a web component generator, and that would allow everyone to embed the studio or the designer component into your own UI framework. With Blazor, that's also possible. It's exposed as or a set of components are exposed as custom elements, and we can embed it here. But there's currently one issue with that, and that's I'm unable to capture events. So whenever I click this row here, it's not publishing the event, or maybe it's publishing the event, but I'm not capturing it from JavaScript for some reason. This is a small issue that I need to, well, it's a big issue if it doesn't work, of course, but something to be figured out. I can just say it did work in the past, but I wasn't able to get it going in time for this presentation. But as a proof of concept, we also have the editor. So here we have the designer with all of the picker here, tabs here, this stuff here. But you can also see another issue here, and this is unrelated to Blazor. This is specifically to do with the fact that Elsa Studio uses Monaco editor for the code editing experience, which uses a module loader that seems to be conflicting with a jQuery library that is included with this theme. So there's a little collision there. And that leads then to a cascading effect of, well, what you see here. This obviously doesn't look good. and this error shouldn't appear as well. But these are little hurdles to figure out. But from a proof of concept point of view, this should work out nicely in case you want to embed the designer into your own application. And in this case, ABP. So ABP is now hosting both the backend, so the workflow engine, as well as the designer, if you wanted to. Obviously, you could also choose to just use the studio as an external application. There's a lot of options and flexibility there, and different teams have different requirements. So I think that is all I have for the demo. I can of course go into much more detail. There's a lot of functionality. It was really challenging for me to find the right features or the most interesting features to look at, because there are many of them. For example, activity composition, the ability to create a workflow and then use it as an activity. There's a big list of stuff that you can do. But I want to leave it here, and yeah, let me know if there's anything we should delve a little bit deeper into, or if you have other questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions from community. The first question I can see, they impressed you embedded Blazor components in MVC page. They ask which UI can you embed? Specifically, they ask Angular UI. Maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the nice thing about custom elements as a web technology, you can embed it in any UI framework, including Angular, Vue, React, or even vanilla HTML and JavaScript. So that all works. That said, to make it more convenient to use, especially to interact with these components, it's recommended to build Angular wrappers. The same goes for React. It's in order to embed it as a React component into your React application, it's recommended to build a little React wrapper, of which we have an example. We don't have an example yet for Angular, but if you're interested, let me just point you to it quickly. So if we go to the Elsa Studio source code, then we see here a wrappers folder. And this is a Lerna project. So that's an NPM package or a framework to generate all sorts of components in different UI frameworks. So we have one for React. Here we have storybooks. So let me. Okay, so here wrappers React. So this, I'm already in this folder. So we have an example for React. Obviously, we also need an example for Angular and for Vue and potentially others. But yeah, definitely works.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question about multi-tenancy. As we know, Elsa has its own multi-tenancy feature. Also, ABP has a multi-tenancy feature. What do you think, how people can integrate the ABP's multi-tenancy feature? Before you explain it, maybe you can explain your own multi-tenancy feature so people can consider it.
Yeah, perfect. So indeed, Elsa also has a multi-tenancy feature, and it supports multi-tenancy at different levels. And the lowest level, so to speak, is to have the same database, same schema, where all of the entities in Elsa, so that's the workflow definition, instances, activity records, everything, has a tenant ID column, so a database field, or just a field called tenant ID that is mapped to a field. So that is one level that Elsa supports. Obviously, you can then also have multi-tenancy with a different database connection string, because you can have a connection string per tenant. So the connection string could be the same database, but maybe using a different schema or a different database altogether. So that's another kind of another level of multi-tenancy. What we don't support yet, but that is something that we have on the roadmap, is to have a separate service container per tenant. So we call it a shell. So a shell, it's like a simple wrapper around a service collection and service container built from that service collection, which allows you to have separate features enabled for your tenant. So you could have tenant A with a set of features, a different set of features compared to tenant B, which could have a different set of features, which is great for SaaS scenarios, of course.
Another topic is related to that a little bit. It's about identity. Let's say we customize some methods to login in identity module of Microsoft in ABP Framework. How it happened? Before we go through the question, so let me ask: you embedded this Blazor in the ABP application. How the authentication works? This is the first. Does it use the same cookies with ABP, or it has its own authentication flow as a single page application?
Thank you for reminding me. I completely forgot to mention that. Sorry, I cut you off. Please finish your question.
Oh, okay. You can start with this one, and I can ask the second one. Yeah.
Of course. Yes.
Okay.
So so to answer your question directly, it uses the same cookie. It uses the same authentication. So it does not use Elsa authentication whatsoever. If you like, I can walk you through it briefly because it is interesting, and also it's quite easy. So let's have a quick look. So we look at the Elsa Workflows UI, and so this is actually this is hosting the Blazor component. So that's also interesting to look at. So for example, the designer is here in the edit Razor page. And as you can see, it uses a custom element with this tag. And this wraps basically the Blazor component. And of course, we need to include some of the Blazor specific JavaScripts, which initializes the Blazor runtime, etc. So that's this aspect. But this being a module, we need to configure, let's see. So let me orient myself a little bit. So we have static files. Okay, so let's switch to the backend where we set up the identity here. Okay, so this is just for token signing. So it does use Elsa token signing. That is then used by the actually, that's not true what I'm saying. Let me find the front end because that is the key. Obviously, when you have the Blazor application, it makes HTTP request and it uses the same authentication or the cookie from ABP. So let me find it. I would have expected it to see here, but I am not seeing it. Okay, let me find it differently. So here we have component, the remote endpoint. It's so easy that I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. I got at the scenario. In this scenario, it sends request from ABP application, so it theoretically it uses the same cookies.
It uses the same cookie automatically. Yes, it automatically attaches that cookie. So the key is to look at the backend and make sure that is configured correctly to use the correct authentication.
I think you don't have to do anything because it's already logged in authentication server. It has cookies, so whenever you send request, just directly it authenticates you. I think in that scenario.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, exactly. It should just work out of the box. But the thing that I'm looking for is that Elsa Studio has a login module, and it needs to be configured to not use Elsa identity with, you need to be explicit about which authentication protocol you're using. And I wanted to find that to show you. And then what I'm using is the OAuth2 protocol for signing in. Actually, that is this one here. So when I use LStudio separately, that's when I need to configure that. So you're right. Within the ABP context, you don't have to. If you're hosting the studio externally as its own application, you'll have to do something, which is like this, if this is the correct solution. I'm not sure if this is the correct solution that oh, okay. So let me just look here. Yeah, okay. So this is what I wanted to show. If you're using the as an external application, instead of using the else identity protocol, just use general OAuth2, because ABP has an open edict module, which is great because that allows us to just use the OpenID Connect protocols. Yeah, and then all I have to do is set the client ID, which I created beforehand in ABP, configure the token endpoint, and set a scope. And I included offline access so that I can actually use my ABP user, admin, and that specific password to log in. So yeah, from this perspective, this is what you would need to do. That's all. And as you correctly identified, when hosted already in ABP, it just works, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, thank you. This explains the second question as well. If people customizes identity in the ABP application, so it will be affected because you are using OAuth2 protocol. So yeah, that's it. Maybe background has extra questions, or we can get questions.
Yeah, I have one more question. In the demo site, you used the Elsa version 3, and as far as I know, some ABP customers are still using Elsa 2. But they want to migrate the Elsa version 3. So in this matter, I have two questions actually. Firstly, what is the main differences between Elsa 2 and Elsa 3? And also, secondly, is it easy to migrate between them?
So to answer the first question, it's the main difference is actually Elsa 3 is a complete rewrite. It has a new architecture. It has a composable activity architecture framework, which is incompatible with what we have in Elsa 2. In Elsa 2, the flowchart logic was implemented directly into the engine. In Elsa 3, it's implemented as its own activity, which allows for other kind of diagrams. That's one of the biggest changes, besides the fact that it's complete rewrite. It also has a pluggable or an abstracted workflow runtime, which allows us to have a distributed locking implementation of the workflow runtime to allow for horizontal scaling. Elsa 2 has that as well, so that model is the same. But then because of the abstraction in Elsa 3, we also have now support for actor model workflow runtimes. So we have an implementation using ProtoActor, where every workflow instance is its own virtual actor, or a grain, so to speak. So those are two main differences. And then another important difference, of course, is the designer. In Elsa 2, the designer does not allow you to drag and drop activities. You cannot do multi-select. It's more of a directed acyclic graph, but it tries to be also to allow you to connect back to other activities. And that designer was not very suitable to that end, as we realized later. Elsa 3 fixes that by using a different designer or flowchart library, so that it's very similar to Elsa 1, where you can freely drag and drop activities. You can use auto layout and do multi-select, copy paste, etc. Those are the three main differences that come to mind. And then there's a ton of little details and improvements, including performance, a better architecture, better modularity, better everything. To answer your second question, there's no easy migration. One, because the activity model although conceptually it's very similar, Elsa 3 brings in different activities that do not exist in Elsa 2 or have a different interface. So it's not straightforward, unfortunately, to carry over from Elsa 2 to Elsa 3. So far, the best approach to do the migration is to recreate the workflows, because this could potentially be a lot of work if you have a large number of workflows, and also if you have complicated workflows. But it does allow for an opportunity to take advantage of the new innovations that come with Elsa 3, such as the use of workflow variables, the use of activity composition, where you can group many smaller activities into larger activities, so you have a better overview of your overall workflow. And that's just to name a few of the advantages. Again, it would have been nice to have a migration path, but unfortunately, we don't have it today.
Okay, thanks. Someone says work together, ABP and Elsa, and in this matter, I have also one more question. As the ABP team, we are curious, what are the thoughts on the ABP framework, and do you see any synergy with Elsa?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I love ABP, the architecture, the modularity. I'm a huge fan of that. It's brilliant, and I'm happy that I got the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper when I prepared for this demo. And yeah, I just love it. It's great. I have a lot of experience with a different application framework, which is similar in concept, and yeah, also very extensible and modular. So yeah, the approach is great, and the tooling around it really helps because I think it does add some cognitive overload initially for newcomers such as myself, and then having the documentation, the studio, it made it really easy for me. When it comes to Elsa and ABP, I think that's a great fit. It fits hand in glove, so to speak, because as I mentioned earlier, Elsa Workflows, it's great. It's great having a workflow engine. It has very powerful capabilities, but it really shines when it executes within the context of an actual domain. So as a simple example, the bookstore domain, we just looked at a simple entity, but you can imagine having maybe a full-fledged CRM system where you have many entities like customers and documents and payments and invoices and lots of processes that are usually implemented, of course, using application services, maybe using some event-driven methodologies. But imagine being able to visualize those processes and also being able to orchestrate larger processes, maybe even across microservices. In that scenario, you probably would want your dedicated workflow engine. But when it comes to an ABP installation, being able to handle all of these events and implementing logic visually, super powerful.
Thanks. I have actually one last question. Here is the question: what is your vision for the future of the Elsa workflow and any exciting upcoming developments?
Great question. So currently, we are obviously, like many other organizations, are looking into the opportunities that AI bring. And so for Elsa Workflows, our next step is to further develop and refine our Agent Studio module. That's one. And also surrounding tooling. So we want to make it even easier for users to create and manage workflows. One thing that I didn't show is the Copilot feature. So we are working on a Copilot function that is very similar to the one that we see in Writer, where we have GitHub Copilot. We have the ability to ask the Copilot about our code, to edit the code, and even have an autonomous agent. We'll have that feature as well in Elsa. So that's a big thing we're working on. We also want to be working on, and this is more for enterprise customers, to have the ability to work with multiple environments and to have the ability to deploy from a central Elsa Studio to deploy to multiple environments, and also at on a very granular level. So you can say this set of workflows should be deployed to those environments, and these workflows are assigned to certain groups of users. So role-based access is a big thing that we are looking to implement. And I'm talking about things short to mid-term. And longer term, we have been talking about ETL. So if you're familiar with Azure Data Factory, I think is the name, the ability to process large sets of data. We want something like that in Elsa as well. And these are just a few examples of things that we have on our mid to long-term horizon.
Okay, thank you. By the way, this is great work. This is complete workflow framework in C# and there's no alternative. Some open source projects are going commercial, like AutomationTools and Mass Transit. What's on your side? Will Elsa have something commercial, or what is in the future?
Yes. So indeed, there's a couple of projects that are open source that are moving to a commercial model. I can understand these projects. Some of them are bigger than others, but it takes time and it costs money. But well, everyone needs to make a living. Let's put it that way. However, Elsa will always remain free and open source and MIT. And this is part of the vision of Elsa. So it has a strong commitment to remaining open source and MIT. That said, of course, the project needs to be sustainable. Continuity is very important, especially for enterprise customers. They need to be able to rely on a product that is sustainable, because it could be a key pillar in their platform. So to that end, we are developing commercial features surrounding Elsa. So this comes in the form of consultancy, support. We're also designing a SaaS platform so that we have Elsa as a hosted solution, similar to Logic Apps, for example. We're also looking into options to providing enterprise-grade Docker images that are suitable for customers that just need something that they can install, similar to MongoDB or some other product that you want to install. Camunda is a great example, which is an enterprise-level BPMN orchestration engine. So we are looking at those options, but the core remains free and open source, always.